Okay, folks, thank you so much again for joining us. We're here with Dr. Dr Prins, PhD. He's one of the world's leading experts in swimming biomechanics, and we're here to discuss the elements of angle, bend, location, speed, intensity, and we're talking about their effect on performance. Dr. Prins, thank you for joining us.
Oh, my pleasure, John. Thank you for having me.
It's always great to see you. So we're going to get right into it right now and talk about a little bit about how we measure them. And then we're going to go over to Jan, and we're going to find out how he measures this and why it's so important. And why it's so important, not only to measure it, but to measure it accurately to gain that data, then to make sure your analysis is correct. And then to make your conclusions correct about how that's going to impact performance. And so let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to share my screen for everyone. This is our book called TQ 400 Tools for Experts, where fluid mechanics has made visual understandings on the way that we interpret a version of what we call kinesiology. And so as we go down here, this is not, you know, kind of the general kinesiology that's taught in school, but this is what a way we look at it. And so we're going to start off over here. And one of the elements that we're going to be looking at is called angle. And then the other one that kind of goes with hand in hand a lot of times is bend. So let's zoom in. And for us, the way we describe it, the angle is the degree to which an instrument, like an upper arm or a forearm, or, you know, the hand is, and the way it's angled, like forward and slightly downward, right? The angle it's on. And then we look down here to bend, and bend is the degree to which the joint has bent, like a wrist bend, something like this. Now we're going to go over to see how important these are. You can see if that arm for us is forward and down, right? And you can see that angle there, that's going to cause pressure towards the hand in the way we do that. So we're going to go over here and take a look. Tell us a little bit about this picture, Jan, and what you're doing here.
This is, John, this is a still picture of a video showing a subject swimming towards one of the 3 cameras we use for the high-speed filming. We're filming at high speeds. The one that's facing the swimmer is the frontal view. And then you'll see a camera sitting on the bottom of the pool. And that's a very unique perspective because we haven't seen too much of that. So we're very proud of the fact that we were able to place this camera directly below the swimmer. And then when we combine all 3 cameras, which we'll show you in a minute, you'll see the effect of what we look at from front, side, and from below, the vertical view.
And you've got a video series on this that's just out too, right? Freestyle biomechanics.
Correct. And all this is showing is how we collect the data with these high-speed cameras. You can see the high-speed cables connecting to the computer that we run on the deck.
And just for really quickly, what is this gear that's on him here? Okay,
those lights are LEDs, which helps the software track the movement. We need to be able to track the entire movement, and we are filming at high speed, so we're generating so much data that the software can recognize the contrast between the black and the light, and then keep track of what's going on in terms of displacement. Otherwise, we'll have to hand click each one, which will take hours and hours, because of an evening, we could generate almost over 250,000 data points.
Oh my gosh.
So thank goodness for the software, but this, and even for land-based motion analysis is what we call this, John. Even in land-based, you will see these illuminated spheres that are stuck to the subject. And that's for the software to keep track of the displacements.
So how important is it to get accurate data for what you're doing?
Well, if you're filming at high speeds, it's very important, right? If you're just filming a swimmer, you get pretty much qualitative data. And that's what we've been doing for as long as cameras have been around. But quantitative data, getting numbers, is the next step. I mean, we don't have it down being able to interpret, of course, is easier when you're swimming at high speeds and you have all these different views. But as we'll make a point, and we do that in our program, there are instances when swimmers know they're making mistakes, but they don't know quite the extent to the mistake. And we show what happens when you're dropping your elbow, or if you're doing an unnecessary S-pull pattern. You can see the consequences of that, how much drop off there is. And that is what's critical.
So you take that data, and there's a process here, if I'm right, you collect the data, but then there's the next step is once you take that data, you have to then basically compile and analyze it, right? And say, can I figure out what does this mean? So we get the analysis of the data, and then we get to a conclusion. This is what this means. And let me just say this, Jan, because you're such a great expert and you're so knowledgeable about what you do. But I have seen some organizations that go out there and they do collect data. And then, but I also notice a lot of times maybe the analysis isn't accurate. How does that impact the conclusion?
Well, I think people have been collecting data for as long as we remember, John. The thing is to be able to show it very cleanly, in a very simplistic way, simplistic in terms of being able to understand it. And I think swimming coaches have been turned off from a lot of the research because there's just tons of tables and graphs and things that really don't really relate. And one of the things we've done, and that's why we picked this particular software, is that we can show the swimmer actually swimming towards the camera or away and have a graph that coincides with it, synchronized with it, so you can see all the movements of the swimmer and what it does to the speeds. And we'll show you some still pictures of that. It's easy to understand, and I think coaches are very visual, and this is why we'll show, and we can look at a picture right now, John, of what we call a report. This report is really the culmination of our filming and the analysis. Now, this is a still picture. The software actually is very sophisticated because it shows the swimmer moving. It's a video. It shows the swimmer moving and this vertical bar traveling. Let's go to the one before, because that shows the faster movement. There you go. And you can see right at the end, halfway through, about the third of through, you can see the top left-hand picture.
Mm-hmm. Oh, top left-hand, yeah.
Left-hand, and then you can drop down and you can see it from the side, and then from the bottom. So mid-stroke, in this particular swimmer is where he is generating the highest swimming velocity. Or speed.
Right up here at the top of the hill, so to speak.
Right. And you can see, and it's very easy for a coach to see that's where it's occurring. Can you see right in the middle?
Right. So what we're talking about when we talk about velocities, we're talking about, you told me before, it's the hips traveling forward in the pool, right? Moving down the pool.
Exactly. And what the graph is plotting actually the view from the side, the bottom left-hand picture.
Okay, this one here.
Yes, going from, in this case, it's going from right to left.
And so we're measuring this point right around the hips, is that right?
How that point is moving in space.
It's moving forward. And so it's moving forward fastest right here.
Correct.
And you can tell where the arm is causing.
Exactly. And that's why the coaches like it, because they can see that that's exactly what they see in real life.
And this is later in the stroke, I guess, then it kind of falls off. Is that right?
Yes, and we can look at that picture, John, and show what happens. That one right there. And here's the interesting thing, and this is why the software is so good, John. And I'm going to challenge the viewer first. This is the end of the stroke, and this is during the extension, where we expect a little pause, right? When you're putting your hands in and you're extending. There's going to be a little lag, but why is there such a severe drop-off? And I'm going to challenge the viewer to look and see if they can tell what is slowing, causing even more of a braking effect.
Got it. Okay, got it. So are we going to answer that one? We're not going to.
Yeah, I'm going to answer it, but look at the top. Look at the top right-hand picture.
Why is that happening?
Exactly. Why? Look at the top right-hand picture. The guy's feet are spreading way too wide.
Right up here.
Exactly, and you can even see this from the top left-hand picture, not as well because his body is clouding it, but when we look at it from the bottom, you can see a leg spreading apart and really affecting frontal resistance.
And that's acting as a resistor, right?
Absolutely.
Got it. It's adding to the resistance up there. That's
why the dip to the curve is so severe.
Got it. Got it. Wow, that's really incredible. Now let's go back here.
Okay.
We see that video, and now we're looking at back to the angle and the bend, right? We were talking about
Right.
angle
So
and
now
bend right here.
Let's talk
So
about
let's talk
angle.
about what's going on with that.
Exactly. And we all know that for decades, the 90-degree elbow bend, John, was the standard. People, coaches, we all felt like if you bend your elbow at 90 degrees, midway through your stroke, you're getting maximum bang for the buck.
And this girl is doing about that, right?
Yeah, exactly. And she's 91.9. We use this again, we use these software to measure all these things. We can do all that as well.
So now what's your data telling us about angle and bend?
Okay, now the question is, why are swimmers now not swimming with 90-degree elbow bends? In spite of being told by their coaches, we want you to bend at 90 degrees, they're not doing it. And the question is why? There's a big why. They are instinctively swimming with more obtuse angles, and obtuse meaning greater than 90 degrees. And the reason we now realize is because the old 90-degree elbow bend, John, was based on a model of lifting something that's a fixed resistance. If somebody gives us a box, we are going to instinctively pull our arms in and hold our arms at about 90 degrees. We're not going to carry that box with our elbows stuck in front of us. Similarly, getting out of the pool. If you ask the swimmers to get out of the pool, or you and I get out of the pool, what are we going to do? We're going to bend our elbows.
Right.
And get out. And that is because that is a fixed resistance, and we're doing it to reduce the forces internally at the shoulders and elbows, because we're reducing the external, what we call the moment arm. When we reduce that, we reduce the demands on our shoulders and elbows.
That makes sense. So if you did it like straight out like this,
right,
it wouldn't make it.
You're asking more. You're asking more. You can do it, but you're asking way more. And this is why our brain knows more about this than anything else, long before we talked about biomechanics. So why are swimmers straightening out? Because the water is not a fixed resistance. The water is not a fixed resistance. And that's why we use propulsive drag forces, just like paddling a canoe. We're using what we call propulsive drag, and part of propulsive drag requires velocity. And if the velocity can go up, then we can exert more drag force. And sure, the further we are away from our shoulder, the faster our hand is traveling.
So when we look at this, so we're saying that it used to be here.
Yes.
A lot of
bend.
bend.
That is, yeah, that's because coaches kept saying, hey,
that's what was being taught, right?
You got to do the same thing like when we give you a heavy thing to carry or getting out of the pool.
Got it. So the interpretation and conclusions weren't exactly what we needed.
No, yeah, it was well-meaning, but the problem is we always assume that the water was just like the side of a pool that didn't budge. But it's the wrong model. The model is that we are using propulsive drag to push the water back. The water actually moves.
And in here, when we see this, we're seeing
traveling faster.
Yep, got it. And so what we're saying is that the swimmer here is not swimming or doesn't have the potential to swim as fast as the one here.
Right.
And this one is also, right, that's a better.
Even faster, right. And if you look at, and again, go back to our program, we show Anthony Irwin,
over here,
who won the 50 free in Sydney as well as in Rio. Mm-hmm. He is at about 160 degrees. And then we also show James Magnuson, who's a two-time world champion in the 100 free. They're both swimming with very straight arms.
Okay, so this is 118. This is 135, 160.
Yeah, those two guys that we show in our program, even straighter than we show right here. But the caution is this, and we all realize this, is the straighter the arm, the more demands on our shoulders. And so sprinters have to be careful. If they do it too much, they're going to be stressing their shoulders, and everybody knows that. And then the whole thing is that sprinters have a very short race. They don't have to do it for longer distances. So you will see that longer distance swimmers instinctively won't bend their elbows, or will bend their elbows a little bit more.
Got it. And so what fluid mechanics recommends to start that process early is to basically get almost 9 years of progressive strength training before you get to college, starting with, dry land exercises, things like that, little by little adding on. So by the time you get up there and you get this type of stress, it's already protected. If you didn't protect it and they throw you on a weight program, then a lot of times you see injuries.
Yeah, exactly. It takes, the body takes a while to adapt.
So Jan, let's jump to three other elements here. We want to look at location generally, and I think that was also included in this one here, which is the locations where things are, right? Their hands in one location, the elbows in another, etc. But then you look at speed, like how fast something is moving, and then tensity is how tight, for us, it's how tight you're holding your hands and your muscles contracting. So there's static tensity to us, right? When we're doing it fluid mechanics, we look at static tensity, which holds your hand right there, it wouldn't move it. Whereas active tensity for us is you trying to move that. So both require two different forms of tensity, right, and contraction of the muscle. Now let's talk, because you had mentioned about speed, and this is a big deal that you've been actually talking to me about, and then saying, okay, you have speed and then you have velocity, and you really want to, they're different things. So let's go back over into here if we can, and this is actually measuring overall velocity of the body's movement, if I'm right.
John, I have no quarrel with people who use speed if people are easier to understand. Speed in science, speed implies a value but doesn't include a direction, and that's why can I
show everybody that really quick, because we have that here to understand that. So when we look at that, we can measure speed in our system on the linear scale, 0 to 10, like how fast is something moving. But a lot of times it may be moving right down here. Let me just see if it'll help me here. Here we go. We look at measuring them in different compartments, and one compartment would be speed, but over a pattern you can have, right? But you're also looking at a direction, right? Not just the speed.
Right, yeah, because I mean, of course, in swimming, you want to swim in a straight line.
Right.
And so, but you have to go from A to B. And that's why in a technical term, I have no quarrel with using the word speed as long as people realize that speed and velocity are somewhat synonymous, but velocity is a little bit more technical in terms of what it involves.
Right. It's measuring the speed and the direction versus just the speed in the one compartment.
Correct.
Right. And you'd need more than one compartment basically to see what direction it's going in.
Yeah. And then what we're showing in the graph, John, if you want to go back to the graph.
Yes, absolutely. There we go.
That's velocity. And the velocity is in the direction, what we call the longitudinal plane, which is the bottom left-hand picture. That's what we're measuring. The swimmer's progress in the bottom left-hand picture from right to left. That's what's being measured.
And they're going from right to left. They're moving this direction.
Yeah, exactly. The swimmer's going in that direction. And so that's what the graph is measuring. The other two are just telling us what those views look like. But that's the view we want.
Got it. Right. This is the big deal. Is how fast you move.
Exactly. And that's what that plane of motion, John, is what we calibrate. We use calibration frames and we set it there. And so the camera, then we film the calibration. And so we know that a meter or two on the picture is equivalent to so many pixels, so that then the software can then translate it to actual velocity.
It's basically like taking time sliced pictures, right? Here, which is why they have to be so fast speed, because you got to take so many pictures, right? And, and to be able to analyze. Is that correct?
Exactly. And so you can see the graph and you see the velocity on the y-axis, which is the vertical axis, and the bottom axis is time. Which is usually the way we want to look at things. We want to see what the velocities or speed were at different times as they swam. So we're actually going from 1.2 seconds to 3.2 seconds. That's how long that whole curve took.
Then if we go back here and we look at this will help right here, here, and here. Now you can understand why Jan is coming up with these conclusions of, right, he can measure the velocity of the hips, and he can measure the different angles and get patterns of what people are doing, right? That get kind of
exactly. I mean, everything is based on being able to get repeatable data, John. If we can look at something and have another, and this is one of the reasons that in filming elite swimmers and elite performers, the research now uses the same subject repeatedly. Instead of taking 5 people and saying, hey, you do this, and another 5 people and saying, hey, you do that, the data is not going to give us the same. What we like to do is use the same subject and say, if you do certain things based on what we see now and change it, we film you again, here's the change. That's what's important, because at the elite level, we don't care what the average person is doing. We want to know what each person is doing.
Gotcha. That's really amazing. So let's talk about one last issue here as a comparison. Sure. And this is just so enlightening, I think. But let's go ahead and look at the types of measurements. At fluid mechanics, we have what's called a competitive or competition measurement. So that's you've got this tilde and then the C. And
Sure.
So what it's saying is one swimmer possibly against another swimmer. You could measure any form of competition. It could be a dolphin you're trying to compare it to, whatever, but that's a C measurement. Whereas an E measurement measures you against your environment, like how deep it is compared to, you know, the surface of the water, where you are in the pool, next to the lane line. That's an environmental measurement to us. And then a kinesthetic or K measurement would be relating one part of your body to another part of your body. So when we look at this measurement here, right, that's relating that angle there. You could also, you know, say, okay, the hand is under the nose type of thing. That would be to us a kinesthetic measurement. And so there's different ways to look at this and different ways to measure. One of the things that I think you're doing here is, sorry, these three is a C measurement, you know, one against the other to see who's winning compared to each other. Is that right?
Yeah, but again, I want to clarify that those pictures are in different swimmers, but when we want to improve a swimmer, we would want to film them, show them what they did, and then have them come back and see if they're doing anything that makes it better.
Altering that same position in the same swimmer, right? Altering different
rather than, yeah, not altering, but looking at what the swimmer is doing in that same position, okay, and seeing whether the velocity is changing.
Got it. So if you put your arm more bent or angled your arm in a different way,
slower or faster, exactly. But if you look at the same swimmer, because at the elite level, John, you have to, the swimmer is their own control.
Got it.
You can't line 5 world record holders up and then another 5 and say, okay, let's see what differences are. That kind of research, it doesn't work.
Folks, if you can understand this, you can understand how valuable the person behind the whole measuring process is, and not just the measuring, but the analysis of that, because you've got so much data and you have to come up with this conclusion that then goes out to the world and helps people understand how to progress. And without that, right, so if you said, oh, well, everybody can take a video and measure, but the thing is, the mind behind that has to have such a great understanding and a holistic understanding of what's going to happen and how that pours back into a useful information for the world of swimming to move forward. What fluid mechanics does is we help get that word out. We put it into pictures so people can easily see it and understand it. But the real research behind everything is great minds like Dr. Prins.
Well, thank you, John. You're very kind.
Well, it's just the truth. So that's absolutely true. So thank you so much for joining us. What we're going to do here too is we were mentioned that Dr. Prins has an amazing video show. To me, it's a masterpiece about the biomechanics of freestyle. You can get that and access that information by going to the fluid mechanics website, fluidmechanics.net. Okay, and go into the fast track, and he's one of our experts under FM experts, and it's right in there. You can watch the show, getting access to the show, watch it. It's absolutely phenomenal. How many sessions do you have in there?
It's a total of 16 sections, and the
Right.
first 4 are complimentary, so they can see what they're getting into. And the second one actually is more detail of the high-speed research, so people can see how we're doing this.
And you can
And
see
then they
just
have to
a
subscribe.
brilliant analysis of this.
Well, thank you, John.
Good. Thank you again, Dr. Prince. Wonderful always to see you.
Pleasure. Thank you.
All right, take care.